Hi, my name is Jenny Lauren Dowden for Conduit News, and today we have Representative Ryan Rose joining us for his impression of the session. Representative Rose is representing District 48, and that is Van Buren and parts of Fort Smith. Hi, thanks for joining us.
Hey, thanks for having me on today. It's a joy to be with you. Been looking forward to this.
Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate it and want to definitely hear your insight and how you believe that this past legislative session went. This is your second term. Give us your overall impression of the session and how you think it compared to your first term.
Sure. Thank you. This was, I felt for me, a busier session. I don't know that the session itself was busier. I just had some opportunities to be involved in some more what I thought was meaningful legislation. I served on the Public Health, Welfare, and Labor Committee and state agencies and governmental affairs. And I know I saw you in state agencies, and so you're well versed in the fact that I think we met pretty sure the most of any committee during the session, and so that kept us busy.
Yeah, it really did. And y'all had some really interesting pieces of legislation, I think, in House state agencies.
Yeah, yes, we did, and I referred to it from the well as the meat grinder, and I think the rumor got around because early in the session, I think people were coming into that committee a little unprepared, and by the time we got to the end, people knew that this committee means business, and for me, and I know you didn't ask this, but for me, I felt like we had a responsibility to our members, and then to Arkansans to really flesh out some of these bills and do our best to not let stuff through that didn't need to.
Yeah, and you guys also heard, just apart from regular legislation, you guys were also tasked with those proposed constitutional amendments, which, as you know, some of those will be on the November ballot.
Yes, we had 20 proposed constitutional amendments on the House side that came through state agencies. So we heard all of those. We heard several of them multiple times, and that was quite an extensive process. And I was proud of the body of the work that state agencies did this session.
Yeah. Well, talk to us about maybe some of the wins that you saw during the session. What were some of the top pieces of legislation, in your opinion?
So, would you like me to talk about the wins of legislation that I authored, or just for the legislature in general?
Maybe in general, and then we can dial down into some of your specific bills.
Sure, great. So, from an education perspective, access, the governor's plan for higher ed across the board, I felt like that was a another great step forward into improving education across our state. The bell to bell no cell phone act. We as a family, I've got a teenager in the house who doesn't have a cell phone yet, and when we do, it's going to be I'm convinced a flip phone, no cameras, no internet.
Yeah.
Some people may think I'm crazy, but I think that the cell phone has eradicated so much development in
Yeah.
the youth of our state and our country. And so I think that driving focus back to the classroom and off of devices like a cell phone is
Yeah.
great. And so that was a great piece of legislation, and I think we did a lot of good work for education in the state. Um, Two tax bills that I think were great. The grocery tax by Representative Underwood, and the homestead tax credit, increasing that to where Arkansans could have another $100 on that tax credit. Both of those bills were good tax bills, good for hardworking Arkansans, putting more money back in their pockets. Um, we I think we hear a lot over the last couple of years about pharmacy benefit managers, more commonly known as PBMs.
Hmm.
HB 1150 made it to where these companies and these individuals have to decide whether they want to be a benefit manager or if they want to be a pharmacy, and kind of pushing back on these monopolistic, vertically integrated concepts. And I believe is going to benefit Arkansans, hopefully lower the cost of drugs and protect small business owners in the state.
You also worked on a few human trafficking bills, Senate Bill 428, Senate Bill 430. Talk to us about those, why you felt those were important to get through.
Thanks for asking about that. The Senate took uh, a strong lead on a human trafficking package of bills. And I was thankful to kind of put a working group together in the fall to focus on some of these issues. And I could talk more about the Morgan Nick Foundation and some stuff we did this session too. But I brought Colleen Nick in, some folks from the governor's office, state police, senators, representatives, and we talked through a lot of this, got into the session, divvied up the bills. I worked on, I carried two specifically, SB 428 and SB 430. And one of those was extending the statute of limitations for victims, and the other one was ensuring mandatory restitution for trafficking survivors. But the overall broad concept was protecting victims, punishing traffickers. But these, I feel like, make Arkansas stronger and more of a national leader in the fight against the exploitation of these individuals. And, I'm sure next session we'll have more. Human traffickers are not disappearing. This is it's a virus on our nation and on the globe, really, and we need to do everything we can to fight against these criminals and protect individuals before they're trafficked, but then also provide protections and restitution for them after they've become victims.
Yeah. Something else that you worked on that I think probably is really important to you. Your wife has battled breast cancer. House Bill 1309, House Bill 1859, House Bill 1309 covers exams for breast cancer. 1859 amends the law concerning mastectomies. Talk to us about this. I'm sure this hits home just so personally for you to be able to advocate for your wife, but then also for so many women across Arkansas. Just share with us why these bills are so important and what it was like to get these through.
Thanks for asking me about these bills. There were I think 4 or 5 really breast cancer related bills in the session, and these were the two that I sponsored and really meant a lot to me. HB 1309, which now Act 268, had to do with waiving all kind of cost sharing or out of pocket costs for women going through diagnostic breast cancer screening. So last session, we passed a bill that removed co-pays, but some cost shifting took place. And so then co-insurance was still there. And so cost was acting as a barrier for many women across Arkansas. And I could give you personal example after personal example from people we've heard from who said just the cost or some of the red tape was enough to deter them from having a diagnostic breast cancer screening done. And cost should not be a barrier. And even the insurance companies agree that diagnosing cancer earlier, it does several things. Saves lives. And this is what I told my colleagues in the House and in the Senate when I presented it in their committee, was that this bill literally will save lives because women will be diagnosed with breast cancer every year. And the longer they go prior to being diagnosed, their chance of survival goes down. So the earlier we can detect it, the more lives that can be saved. And removing the cost barriers makes this easier for women. No cost. That's the concept. And so insurance companies agree because also the costs are elevated the later you discover it. More invasive, more expensive, more difficult treatments. And so HB 1309 eliminated those costs for diagnostic breast cancer screenings, and it will save lives.
Yeah. I want to go back to, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just say the second bill, 1859, had to do with providing more methods for women to be made whole following mastectomies. Breast reconstruction after mastectomies is not something most people are familiar with unless you or a loved one has had to go through it. And so surgical mesh and nerve grafting are some now covered procedures for women who go through this breast reconstruction, and they hadn't been previously covered. And this puts more tools, so to speak, in a really, I guess, coarse way, puts more tools in the toolbox for the doctors, surgeons, but also the patients. This doesn't mandate that they have to use these methods, but it makes them available And in my wife's case, she's had 7 associated surgeries with her breast cancer. And in her last reconstructive surgery, they used a surgical mesh, and it has proven to do exactly what it was designed to do. And there's women who need that surgery. And for us,
Yeah.
we were fortunate that our insurance covered it. But for a lot of women, it had not previously been covered, and now it will.
Wow, that's fantastic. And I'm sure so many people are grateful for those pieces of legislation. Um, there was another bill that you co-sponsored. You co-sponsored House Bill 1662. That one prohibited foreign lobbying. Britt McKenzie, I believe, was the House sponsor. Easily passed the House. It could not get out of the Senate. I think a lot of people, and that was on the very last day of session in April. A lot of people were left scratching their heads after watching the Senate vote. I know that you are in the House, and I'm asking you to speculate, but um, they had expunged the vote multiple times and they would just vote again and again. And I think that, it went down to the third vote and they still couldn't get it over the finish line. A lot of people would argue like that's a pretty basic bill. And it's just basically saying, hey, we're not going to allow foreign interests to lobby on behalf of, China or Russia. And why, I mean, what are your thoughts on that? Why do you think that seemed to have such a difficult time getting over the finish line?
So I think there's a couple of prevailing lines of thinking that you could use on this. First, I want to say it was a very good bill. Representative McKenzie did an excellent job. I am absolutely against hostile foreign entities being able to lobby, in our state, and of course, in our country as well. And I think Representative McKenzie and our team in the House did an excellent job getting it across the finish line. And something that I'm sure you're well aware of, and maybe some of your viewers are, but maybe not all, is that it takes a lot of work to get any bill across the finish line. Uh, Relationships, um, informing your colleagues, the way you conduct business, the way you've worked with them to help get their legislation across the finish line. Good legislation, and in the Senate, like you said, you're asking me to speculate. Um, it, it I wish that Senator Johnson had been able to get that out of the Senate. For whatever reason, after multiple attempts, it died over there on the Senate floor. And if you looked at the vote total, it was really a divided Senate, and
Yeah.
it's hard to know whether that was all policy related or if it was politics related. I think by and large, a lot of those folks in the Senate are going to agree that we don't want China, Russia, hostile foreign entities lobbying in our state. But when you get right down to it, there's all kinds of reasons that people will ultimately choose to vote for or against the bill. The folks who voted for it, those are guys and gals, senators who I've worked well with, and there's some folks who voted against it who I've worked well with. I don't know why they decided not to. I'd hope that bill would have gotten across the finish line. But as I think you'll find when you ask most House members, we're not always sure why the Senate does what they do and why they don't do what they do. Senator Hester, I think, by and large, does a great job leading as a pro tem over there. For whatever reason, they just couldn't get it across the finish line. Wish they
Yeah.
had. And it's one of those that we'll regret not getting across until next session, when hopefully we can do it then.
Yeah, and a few other bills that didn't make it was and I don't believe we've talked about this yet, and let me know if we have, and you were a co-sponsor on this, was the soda tax bill that failed on the floor with Representative Ray. Just brief thoughts on that one.
I thought it was a great bill. That's why I was co-sponsor, supportive. I talked to a lot of colleagues about it before committees, before the floor. Unfortunately, there's some folks who, even in our party, that will be adamantly against these kinds of tax cuts. Sometimes it's some kind of conviction they have. Other times, I think it's just some misinformation or misunderstanding on what a bill does or doesn't do. And I think the largest component of this bill that was unrealized by those who voted against it, there was this concept that it was just going to bleed Medicaid dry.
Yeah.
And there were revenue triggers that were in place that, these these funds that are coming from the soda tax, we're not just going to go to zero on day one and then leave organizations and government programs with an empty bag. There were triggers that would have prevented anything from happening unless the revenue was there to fill the gap from other tax revenue. And so this was perfectly orchestrated to take away what I felt like was our most regressive tax, this or the grocery tax, and really punishes the working class and lower income families the most.
Yeah.
And I feel like just some folks needed more information. I think Representative Ray did an excellent job. I just think we had some members who just didn't get it by the time they voted on it. And
I think so too.
Here's the other thing. If I remember right, this had to have a higher threshold too. I think it needed 67 votes. And so you really got to get the lion's share of the Republican Party, the Republican members of the legislature on board. And some folks just couldn't get there, unfortunately.
That's right. Yeah. Also, you were a co-sponsor of Representative Underwood's Keep the Bonus bill. That was such a good bill. It got nowhere. And Underwood had some really good tax cut bills, and God love them. I mean, they just got nowhere. And that makes me question, where we are with the state income tax, elimination of that, the fact that we couldn't even phase out the soda tax. A lot of Underwood's tax bills just fell flat. Kavanaugh had several good ones. And I sat in Rev and Tax a lot, and it's just Lundstrom had a really good private property tax relief bill. That one fell flat. And it just makes me question, like, does our legislature have the appetite for these tax cuts?
I think they have the Republican legislators. There's probably a couple prevailing lines of thinking. You have some folks who, anytime there's a chance to cut taxes, they're going to be a yes. There's some folks who they're not and may be hard pressed to ever vote for a tax cut. And there's some folks in the middle who maybe they're only for income tax cuts, state income tax cuts, and they feel like any other tax cuts will stall that process. I probably fall in the camp of the folks who always want to cut taxes wherever we can. And if I have to choose between a state income tax and maybe something that's more specific, I would opt for the state income tax. But we didn't have any state income taxes on the docket, this round. And so any of these tax cuts that we could have gotten, I think would have been good. And it's not even, that, oh, this is going to be good for me. When we can lower taxes on hardworking Arkansans, we put more money back in their pockets so they can keep it, save it, spend it, invest it. They can do more with it. They know what's best. I trust Arkansans to know what's best for their own money, not the government.
Yeah, we agree. Okay, let's shift gears just very briefly. Session has ended, and as you've probably noticed, and you might have retweeted, some endorsements are rolling in now for campaign re-elections and announcements. What are your future plans moving forward politically?
I have not made any. That's a great question. I haven't made any announcements. I would say I expect to be making an announcement in the near future, and I have every intention of coming back in the future. So we always will pray, discuss it. My wife and I will talk about our family, kids, and when we're all on the same page and in agreement, we'll have an announcement about that.
All right. Well, I hope that you come back on Conduit and we can talk about that announcement when you're ready.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that.
Anything else that you want to add that maybe we missed or didn't cover?
Sure. So something that I campaigned on when I ran for office, one of these tax cuts we were talking about, so to speak, is, I wanted to lower the used car sales tax. And this is something that's come up the last couple of sessions and for various reasons kind of got shelved. And, my intention moving forward, I wish we could have gotten one of these passed. My intention for next session is I want to run a used car sales tax exemption that eliminates the used car sales tax under $10,000. Sometimes it can be overcomplicated. Folks want to do this or this and move this up or whatever. Here's the short of it is that over 10,000, if I remember correctly, I think folks it's 10,000 up are paying 6.5% sales tax, and 4,000 to 10,000 3.5%. Under 4,000 is 0%. For most people, that 10,000 and under purchase of a used automobile is going to be the largest purchase they make that year for the next couple of years. Yeah. And they're using it to get their kids to and from work, or get their kids to and from school, to get themselves to and from work. And if we can remove that barrier of that sales tax, just to make life a little easier, I think we should. And I think that 10,000 and under, the fiscal impact on that, it's there, but it's not going to break anybody's bank. And I think it's something we should do. It's time. It used to be 2,500 some years back. They moved it to 4,000 a few years back. It was amended a little bit to make that 3.5% kind of a compromise. We just need to get rid of it at least at 10,000 and under. And I think we should do that. And I intend to run that next session.
All right. Well, we'll be watching that. Sounds good. Well, thank you, Representative Rose.
Yes. Hey, thank you. I appreciated being on. Appreciate the work that Conduit does. I love reading your content. I love that you're committed to fighting for Arkansans, lowering taxes, good legislation, and look forward to being a partner moving forward.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. Talk to you soon.
Yes, ma'am.